People have been underestimating you your entire life. And at some point, you stopped correcting them. Not because you gave up, because you figured something out that most people never do. And if you're built the way I think you are, that wasn't resignation. That was strategy. Underestimation is real. It shows up in who gets the assignment, who gets the room, who gets credited for the idea they heard you say 6 months ago. And it has a cost. But somewhere along the way, you started doing something with it. Here are 7 signs you've been underestimated your entire life and used it. Sign 1. You let people finish being wrong. They explain things to you that you already know. They make assumptions about your ceiling, your abilities, your ambition. They talk over you in meetings, and you sit there and you say nothing. That effect is real. People notice you don't push back. The room lets them keep going. You get filed away as someone who doesn't challenge, doesn't lead, doesn't have much to contribute. They're not entirely wrong about how it looks. But psychologist Joyce Erlinger at Florida State University, studying the gap between self-assessment and actual performance, found something specific. The more capable a person actually is, the more likely they are to underestimate their own performance while consistently overestimating the abilities of others. Which means the loudest people correcting you are often the least accurate ones in the room. You already knew that. You just didn't say it out loud. Sign 2. You don't telegraph your moves. People call you secretive, closed off, hard to read. They don't know what you're planning because you don't tell them, not out of manipulation. Because you've learned, usually the hard way, that announcing your moves before you make them costs you more than it gives you. That gap is real. When you don't preview what you're about to do, people fill the silence with their worst interpretation. Arrogant, indifferent, checked out. Neither is accurate, but you gave them nothing to correct it with. Psychologist Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic, in research published by Harvard Business Review, found that the traits we associate with leadership confidence, charisma, visibility, are poor predictors of actual performance. The people who quietly deliver have a word for this. They call it competence. You've been practicing it your whole life without that word. Sign 3. You read rooms that other people don't even know exist. You walk into a meeting and within 5 minutes you know who holds the actual power. You know what the conversation is really about, not what's on the agenda. You know who's performing and who's deciding. And you say nothing. Most people in that room are working with what's visible. You're working with what's real. One executive described her first major boardroom meeting. She was 34, the youngest in the room. She spent the first 40 minutes watching. Not frozen. Watching. When she finally spoke, it was 7 sentences. She'd already mapped what 3 people needed to hear and what 1 person needed to believe was their own idea. Afterward, a senior partner pulled her aside and said, "You didn't say much." She said, "I said enough." She got the account. That's not passivity. That's intelligence that only works when it's invisible. Sign 4. You've learned to run as the underdog. You've been the person people bet against. The long shot in the room. And sometimes, that landed hard. There were rooms you walked out of knowing you'd been counted out before you opened your mouth. And they weren't always wrong about the odds. Sometimes, you were the long shot. The question is what you built from that. You built. Samir Nurmohamed, a professor at Wharton, published research in 2020 in the Academy of Management Journal on what he called the underdog effect. He found that people explicitly told they were expected to fail performed at significantly higher levels when they internalized underdog identity, not as injury, but as information. Not proof they didn't belong. Fuel. That distinction is the whole thing. Sign 5. You don't perform confidence. You demonstrate competence. The people who got the rooms early, the loud ones, the visible ones, they were good at looking like they knew what they were doing. And sometimes they did. But often you watch them deliver less than they promised. More noise than output. And people kept choosing them anyway. Dr. Jennifer Kahnweiler, who has spent years researching introverted leaders, found that the most effective executives in high-pressure environments aren't the most visibly confident. They're the most consistently prepared. Confidence is something you display. Competence is something you leave behind. People who've been underestimated their whole lives tend to learn that distinction early, because they had to. But here's the question I need you to sit with. Are you actually using their underestimation? Or are you holding on to it as evidence the world owed you more? Both can look like patience from the outside. Both can feel like strategy. Only you know which one it actually is. Sign 6. You've outlasted people who started louder. You've watched it happen. The person who had the room at 30, the one people were excited about, the one who moved fast, a decade later, you're still here. They're somewhere else. And for a long time, you didn't know why. You weren't flashier. You didn't campaign. You didn't take up more space. Susan Cain, in her research on introversion, found that people who process deeply, who take longer to act, but integrate more information before moving consistently, outperform on long horizon goals. The sprint belongs to noise. The distance belongs to depth. If you're a man who's been underestimated, you know what it's like to be treated like furniture in a room that hasn't figured out what you are yet. Your quiet gets read as weakness right up until the moment you make the call that changes the outcome. And by then, the people who underestimated you have moved on to underestimating someone else. You don't need them to know. You just move. If this is the first time someone put this into words for you, follow for more on the psychology of quiet intensity. Sign 7. You never let them know you know. You've been aware of the underestimation the whole time. You've seen it in how they phrase the questions, how they assign the room, how they skip your name when listing contributors. You noticed every time. And here's what that actually cost you. People genuinely believed you didn't see it. They made decisions around you as if you were unaware. Opportunities went to louder people, not because they were better, but because no one thought to ask whether you wanted them. That's the real price of staying invisible. It's not small, but here's what it gave you in return. Research by organizational psychologist Adam Galinsky at Columbia Business School found that professionals who maintain strategic ambiguity about their capabilities in the early stages of professional relationships consistently achieve better long-term positioning than those who front-load their credentials. The moment you correct their underestimation, you give up the asymmetry. You stop being the variable they're not accounting for. You become the known quantity. And that's a smaller position than where you were. You understood this without being taught it. That's not something most people figure out. The most dangerous people in any room aren't the ones who tell you what they can do. They're the ones who already know. Which sign hit closest to home? Drop the number in the comments. And if you know someone who's been counted out their whole life, send this to them.